case, I am going to call to order the September 9th, 2020 meeting of the Open Space Board of Trustees, and welcome everyone that's in the meeting, either online or on the phone. As we do at each meeting, we'll start with a roll call. Hal Hallstein.
I'm present.
Karen Holweg.
Here.
Dave Kuntz.
Here.
And Caroline Miller.
Here.
Everyone is present, Leah. Just a quick agenda overview. We have a fairly light agenda tonight, a nice change. And thank you to Dan and staff for making that happen. We do not have any public hearings on specific topics, but shortly after approval of the minutes, we will have an open comment on any topic. And so at this point, I will ask Allison Eklund to talk about the virtual meeting rules and the process for signing up for public comment. Allison.
Thanks, Kurt. Let me share these slides. Okay, do you all see that my screen now? The slides, okay. So I'll just read through these bullet points here. This meeting has been called to conduct the business of the City of Boulder. Activities that disrupt, delay, or otherwise interfere with the meeting are prohibited. The
And
time
Allison, I'm not seeing the slide.
Oh, you don't.
I see you.
Oh,
Allison.
what?
Yeah, I'm not seeing it either.
Oh yeah, let me make sure those get up there. How about now?
No.
No.
All right. Let me drag them over here. Do you see them?
No.
No.
Do you see, let's see.
And if you, oh yeah, there we go, Allison.
Okay, sorry about that.
There you go.
Oh.
Yep.
Okay. So the time for speaking will be limited to public comment at the beginning of this meeting. No person shall speak except when recognized by myself or Kurt, and no person shall speak for longer than the time allotted. So tonight that will be for 3 minutes. Each person needs to register with a real name in order to be called upon to speak. So if you are listed as something like Tom's iPad, you will be asked to either rename yourself, or you can chat with me and I can rename your device for you. No video will be permitted except for the board members and staff presenting. All other participants will be by voice only. The person presiding at the meeting shall enforce these rules by muting anyone who violates. So that's Kurt. If the chat function is enabled, which it will be, you can communicate with me through the chat, and you can send technical Zoom related type questions only. And then only the host and individuals designated by the host will be permitted to share their screen during this meeting. So let me stop sharing that. Okay, Kurt.
And do you need to say anything more about how people should sign up to speak, Allison?
I don't see anyone joining by phone. So
Okay.
yeah, so other than that, they can just raise their hand.
Okay, very good. Well, we will go through the minutes and then we will come back to open comment. And so at this point, I think we're ready to approve the minutes from August 12th, 2020. Does anyone have a comment or a correction for page 1 of the minutes? Karen and Dave, I see your hands up. Go ahead, Karen.
I would like to add 2 sentences, and I've sent these in writing to Leah. I don't know whether you want them put up on the screen through a shared screen or not, but I can read them.
Yeah, why don't you read them and we'll see how complicated they are.
Under agenda item 3, which has to do with the operating budget. The board asked questions to clarify budget cuts and staff reductions/furloughs. The board thanks staff for some clarification regarding the miscellaneous revenue category and requested that future budgets, Leah, I don't have the copy in front of me, provide a footnote to show more detail for miscellaneous totals and other unusually large dollar amounts. Is that close?
So Karen, what you read is what you would like to have put in the minutes?
Added under agenda item 3.
Okay.
Any questions or concerns about Karen's addition to agenda item 3? Okay, we will assume that will be added then. Dave, you had a comment?
Yes, on agenda item 6, and Karen may have something to add to that as well. It's
So
the
let me just
last-
ask, any other changes on page 1? Doesn't look like it. Okay, Dave, we're on page 2. Go right ahead.
Yeah, the last paragraph on page 2, the second sentence, which starts Karen and Dave worked. Leah, I would suggest that the language actually read Karen and Dave reported on edits to the draft OSBT combined and sorted recommendations to council on the South Boulder Creek Flood Mitigation Project, 2018 to 2020, just to make sure we're clear and accurate on what we edited. The last part was an editorial comment by me. The sentence ends 2018 to 2020.
That's good.
Okay, Leah, did you track that?
Yeah, no, we can add that if the board wants it.
Okay, so you've got all of that. Any questions for Dave or comments on that? I think it's good to get the title of the document in there. That's good, Dave. Any other changes on page 2?
Yeah, I have one more.
Okay.
Under agenda item 4,
Okay.
a sentence that says Karen Holweg asked if the Human Relations Commission, which is responsible for Indigenous Peoples Day, should not be mentioned in section 1. And Jean,
You're cutting out, Karen.
Karen Holweg asked if the Human Relations Commission, which is responsible for Indigenous Peoples Day, should not be mentioned in section 1. Jean Gatza said she will check on that.
And where are you adding that? Is that
On agenda item 4,
Yeah.
beneath the public comment,
beneath
paragraph.
the public comment? Okay.
Before the motion, yep.
Okay. And why don't you, now that we know where you're putting it, why don't you go ahead and read that again?
Third time's the charm.
Yep.
Karen Holweg asked if the Human Relations Commission, which is responsible for Indigenous Peoples Day, should not be mentioned in section 1. Jean Gatza said she will check on that.
Okay. Any questions or comments about that change? Any other changes on page 2? I think that's it then. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of August 12th?
I so move.
Second?
Second?
Second from Karen Holweg. Okay, so Dave moved and Karen Holweg seconded. I will do the roll call here. Hal Hallstein,
I approve it.
Karen Holweg,
Yes?
Dave Koontz,
Yes.
Caroline Miller,
Yes.
and Kurt Brown, yes. So the meeting minutes are approved unanimously. Okay, that takes us to the public comment for any topic. And Allison, how many folks do we have signed up for tonight?
We don't have any signed up, so we could just ask now if any. We only have one person from the public in attendance so far, so we can just
Obviously,
ask.
our agenda was not exciting enough.
I guess not.
Well, yes, why don't you just ask to see if anyone else would like to talk?
Right, so now it would be the chance to raise your hand if you wanted to participate in public comment. And I'm not seeing any takers.
And we don't have any indication that we've got a problem with the system. I mean, this is a little unusual to have so few people on.
It is a little unusual. In fact, I just had Phil Yates call in from his phone to make sure that that was working too. And
Okay.
Yeah, and I saw him pop on his phone as well. So.
Okay, I appreciate you checking. Okay, well then we will close public comment and we will move ahead to matters from the department, and I'll turn it over to Dan.
All right, well, we'll try to make this exciting. As exciting as we can, and we actually are going to start off the evening with something the department certainly feels is exciting. We're going to introduce to you one of our newer program areas that's been recently formalized. It's been in existence now in a formal state since 2019, and it's what we call our Recreation Stewardship Program. And this is a program area that the directors team, we identified a need to have formalized as a way to better integrate recreation management efforts across the department. As most of you know, the department is broken up, if you will, or sort of divided into 4 service areas. And underneath each of those service areas, there's a number of work groups or program areas. And so we felt a need to have a specific formalized program area around recreation management that could span across all of the service areas. And so that was one of the motivations behind this. And formalizing this was actually building on some past attempts to have a focused program area and staff position that's dedicated to recreation management. And what this new program area will seek is to build on the quality work that has been done in the past, and to help coordinate and implement recreation management and policy for the department. So we have a few presenters that are folks that are working in this new formalized program area, and I'm going to start off by introducing Adam Gaylord, our recreation ecologist, who is supervising this program area, and I believe Adam will be the first to speak, and he'll introduce some of his colleagues who are working in this area. So, Adam, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Dan. Really appreciate it, and thank you to the board for having us this evening. We really appreciate the opportunity to share the Recreation Stewardship Program with you. Next slide, please. Today, we're going to lead you through a discussion of recreation management at OSMP, and why the Recreation Stewardship Program was created, our big picture vision for the program, and a little bit about what each of us in the program does. Next slide. But first, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about who we are. As Dan said, my name is Adam Gaylord. I'm the recreation ecologist and the supervisor for the Recreation Stewardship Program. I have my master's in wildlife management, and I've been at OSMP for almost 5 years now, formerly with the Ecological Stewardship Work Group. I'm lucky enough to work with Lisa Gonzalo, who has a master's in recreation management and brings 7 years as an OSMP ranger to the recreation coordinator role. And Jake Engelman, who is our temporary trails research coordinator. He brings a degree in ecology and 8 years of trails management experience to the role. And I'll get into a little bit more about what each of us does later. But first, I wanted to talk a little bit more about recreation management at OSMP. Next slide. Now, much like the master plan focus areas, ecosystem health and resilience, and responsible recreation and stewardship enjoyment aren't provinces of any one work group. Recreation management is a department-wide affair. Here I've highlighted some of the work groups whose core duties are recreation related: rangers in orange, trails in green, planning in purple, education and outreach in yellow. Every group handles some aspect of recreation management on OSMP, and it's certainly not limited to these groups. And while each of these groups is quite good at what they do, the department identified a need for a single program to bring their efforts together, to integrate the efforts and serve as a home for our overarching recreation policy, including programs that don't readily fit into any one of these programs. The Voice and Sight Tag program, for example. Hence the creation of the Rec Stewardship Program down here in red, and which is part of the Resource and Stewardship Division, I think is not the right word, but yeah, part of Resource and Stewardship. So to zoom in on us a little bit more, next slide, please. The Rec Stewardship Program here in orange is within the Recreation and Cultural Stewardship Group, which is also home to Human Dimensions, which we work with closely on things like voice and sight compliance monitoring, among other things. As Dan said, we introduced the program in early 2019 and spent most of the year in a detailed scoping effort, talking to individuals and work groups and identifying opportunities and clarifying roles and responsibilities to understand where we fit in the department. So now hopefully you understand a little bit more about where we fit in the department. So let me tell you a little bit more about what we do. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start with the larger vision for the Recreation Stewardship Program. These are the big picture themes we've identified, and I'll get a little bit more in depth into each of these in a minute, but our vision is to serve as the home for recreation management on OSMP, to champion research and data integration, bridge the gap between recreation and preservation, and to improve conservation through regulatory compliance. Next slide, please. Delving a little deeper, as I said, the program was created to serve as a home for recreation management. That means helping to develop and apply consistent recreation policy and best practices system-wide. And much like the Ecological Stewardship Group serves as subject matter experts for all things ecology, recreation stewardship can serve that role for recreation management, representing rec management in planning efforts and infrastructure projects. Another primary goal is to better integrate research and data into management decisions, which of course relates to the master plan strategy, developing a laboratory approach to conservation, which includes the research we conduct within our program, like Jake's trail condition monitoring that he'll tell you a little bit more about, and then other data from within OSMP, like all the great visitor use data that Human Dimensions collects, and research that's conducted locally, nationally, worldwide, that can inform how we manage OSMP. Next slide, please. We also seek to build and strengthen bridges, both internally between all the programs doing such great recreation-related work, but also a larger conceptual bridge between conservation and responsible recreation, recognizing that conservation stewardship in our public is often born from positive visitor experiences on our system. Or as Sir David Attenborough said, no one will protect what they don't care about, and no one will care about what they have never experienced. Finally, our program seeks to improve regulatory compliance. Now, when I use the term regulatory compliance, I use it in a broad sense here, including OSMP's own regulations, such as looking for opportunities to simplify the regulatory landscape to make rules easier for our public to understand and follow, and more important, and more consistent for our rangers to enforce. Also working with E&O staff to develop clear messaging around OSMP regulations, both of which Lisa will tell you a little bit more about, but also maintaining compliance with local, state, and federal environmental laws and regulations, which I'll tell you a little bit more about later. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lisa Gonzalo to tell you a little bit more about what she does every day.
Thank you, Adam. Just waiting for the slide to change here. Lisa Gonzalo, Recreation Coordinator. And the vision statement for the Recreation Management Program is promoting safe and responsible recreation while fostering an appreciation of the outdoors for current and future generations. Next slide. As mentioned earlier, recreation-related work stretches across a lot of work groups at Open Space. And beginning with the proactive management solution square at the top of the slide, This area includes things like regulatory design, trail design, signs and messaging, education and outreach, rangers, the list goes on. And so the work of recreation management is to bring into alignment all of these efforts built around the importance of visitor safety and natural resource protection, the goal of which was achieving what we're calling natural intuitive compliance with minimal negative impact to the visitor experience whenever it's possible. This allows visitors to have a positive experience, allowing for opportunities to build lifelong memories, like hiking to a new peak, getting married, or discovering new locations with your family. These memories instill a stewardship ethic, and it motivates visitors to want to protect these places for future generations. In essence, we're creating partners to work alongside us as responsible recreationists and stewards. Next slide. In a 2003 International Journal of Wilderness article by Robert E. Manning, he classified problem behaviors of wilderness visitors into 5 basic types, listed in the problem column there on the left-hand side, followed by an example, and then by the potential effectiveness of information and education for each. The pictures on the left are of open space specific examples taken right here at home. Beginning with those categories highlighted in green, these are identified as actions that would have a higher effectiveness rate with education and information. These include careless actions like littering, unskilled actions like getting stuck on a rock, or uninformed actions like this child picking wildflowers in the meadow. Those highlighted in blue are less likely for education and information to change behavior and require more of a heavy-handed approach, such as enforcement action. These would involve things like illegal actions, which are deliberate, such as camping or having a campfire on open space, or down below, an unavoidable action. It's not intentional, but the example here we have is of a paraglider having to emergency land in a prohibited area for their own safety due to perhaps a changing weather condition. And if you'll notice that the blue and green colors correspond to the work that I do, which will be shown on the next slide. So top is the green related to the education information section. The GOCO messaging study is a grant-funded research study in partnership with Jefferson County and El Dorado State Parks to look at effectiveness with trail courtesy messaging and yielding. We were expecting the results this year, but due to COVID, unfortunately, we're delayed by 1 year. So stay tuned for 2021. Leave No Trace is a nonprofit organization based here in Boulder, responsible for developing the Leave No Trace principles, which you're probably familiar with. And then finally, the Enjoy Protect messaging campaign that we're building, which is centered on responsible recreation, and the idea was born out of the Visitor Master Plan. Below that are some examples of the partnerships we have with recreational user groups. This is a department-wide effort to build relationships and partner with these groups to understand what we can do to improve their experience while working with them to address any concerns that we might be seeing on our system. In blue there is the recreation regulatory piece, and this is working very closely with the rangers on this one, but recreation management is home for recreation regulatory review and generation of new regulations. And lastly, program coordination. Some overall program coordination right now includes dog management, which is voice and sight coordination, which is informed primarily by human dimensions data. And then the climbing access coordination, which is partially informed by Jake Engelman's trails research data, which he will talk about a little bit more in his section.
Hello again, this is Jake Engelman, Trail Research Coordinator. You might remember me from the Undesignated Trail Survey presentation last fall. I'm here to talk a little bit about the Trail Research Program. So the vision of the program is supporting resource and infrastructure stewardship by informing adaptive management decisions. Next slide. So really the primary focus of the Trail Research Program is on research and data integration. So some big examples of some ongoing 5-year monitoring cycles, the designated trail monitoring, which informs prioritization of trail maintenance and the effectiveness of trail design concepts, and also informing maintenance cycles. And the undesignated trail monitoring, which informs prioritization of management efforts, prioritization of restoration projects, planning process, trail design process. And these projects have kind of morphed into some different discrete projects, like the climbing access inventory that Lisa just mentioned, which will inform the department-wide effort on climbing management, and outdoor recreation access route inventory, which focuses on trailhead trails and facility trails, and really focusing on accessibility in those. Next slide. So an example of some of the research and data integration, here's a map of the High Plains Trail. This is a small section trail that was rerouted in 2018 with the help of some bike volunteers. So the 2015 trail condition monitoring data showed some urgent repairs necessary on the trail. It was too steep, it was eroding. The resource staff also identified a way to bring that trail out of a wetland. And so you can see the follow-up condition monitoring showing some improved conditions and really that detailed trend information. Next slide. So here's just an example of some of the data points that we have. So these are photos. We have photos of about every 20 feet of our designated trail system. So on the top, you can see some insights into revegetation on a trail that you might miss otherwise, and some work done in the bottom pictures for some bike cattle guard installation. Next slide. Another primary focus of the trail research program is on data analysis and stewardship. So taking that more detailed data and summarizing it in a way that can be useful in some long-term trends. So this is a map of condition scores of trail segments from 0 to 100. Similar to what our transportation department uses for their road maintenance. And it's really just focused on that long-term trend. You know, we can do cost estimating on deferred maintenance, asset management estimating, maintenance cycles. We can just really look at the effectiveness of our trail management. Next slide. A more public facing, and I presented this a couple of years ago to the board, the trail difficulty and access information. So this is again just a summary of that more detailed information and how it can inform a visitor on different hikes throughout the system, and they can really choose what their needs need and really focus on that accessibility piece for visitors. Next slide. So really, last want to touch on how the trail research program fits into the adaptive management process. Here's an example using the trail condition monitoring that I've been discussing. So this is just showing how the data informs the design and work, which informs trail management objectives, how we build for different uses, and the trail management project work, and all those processes inform one another. So it's really a cycle, and we keep learning about our trail management. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Adam.
All right, thanks, Jake. Again, this is Adam Gaylord. Tell you a little bit more about the Recreation Ecology program, which is centered around the premise of improving policy and practice through a better understanding of the interface of recreation and ecology, both of which, recreation and ecology, of course, touch everything we do and every work group at OSMP. Next slide, please. Better understanding how they interface and interact means research and data, both designing and implementing studies on OSMP and keeping track of research findings from all over the world, and then using the findings from both to inform management decisions and planning efforts and individual projects. Next slide, please. It also means helping to bring the themes we've discussed into OSMP infrastructure projects. This is the High Plains Trail reroute that Jake introduced you to. Project was complete in 2018 and consisted of building a new section of trail, which is in that lovely purple, or no, the new section's in the turquoise, and closing and restoring the old section of trail, which is in the purple there. It was a good little project that the trail staff did a really good job with. It's been very well received, especially by the biking community. And it's a good example of the type of project I work on. As the recreation ecologist, I provided an initial design feedback, generally about avoiding and minimizing impacts to natural resources, in this case, the lovely little herbaceous wetlands surrounding the drainage. And I also coordinate review by other ecological and cultural resource staff to make sure the right people are brought into the project at the right time. For example, we might not bring in the restoration ecologist into the project until the design is finalized and we need to discuss the details of restoring the closed section of trail. So that's all about making sure the appropriate staff can speak to the pertinent resource concerns for a given project while making the best use of staff time. I also manage any local, state, and federal environmental permitting that's necessary, which of course means staying abreast of any changes in environmental law. For example, the changes to the Federal Clean Water Act that took effect earlier this year, and then coordinating with the pertinent agencies to obtain necessary permits and clearances. For this project, it was the City of Boulder Wetlands permit to restore the closed trail near the drainage. Finally, I keep an eye on the project during construction to make sure we follow our ecological best practices. And then after construction, I monitor revegetation of the site to make sure restoration is successful. That's generally 3 to 5 years or whatever is mandated by the permit. And then I report the progress to the pertinent agency. Next slide, please. So that's the Recreation Stewardship Program and the kind of work we do. We serve as a home for recreation management, building cohesion among staff efforts, promoting stewardship, championing research and data, and improving regulatory compliance. Next slide. And with that, I'd like to thank you again for your time, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have. If you have any.
Allison, there we go. If you have a question, just raise your hand. I see Caroline.
Hey, am I unmuted? Yes, I am. Okay. Thank you, Adam. That was a really great presentation. I'm very excited for the program. Just a quick question, because I heard you talk about the biking community after, and I know that you guys had the slide up that talked about all of our partnerships, whether it was the climbing community or I saw the horseback riding community. Did we have a partnership with anyone in the biking community at this time?
Lisa, I'm going to let you speak a little bit more to that, if you would, please.
Yeah, happy to. Boulder Mountain Biking Alliance is primarily the group that we work with directly. Yep, and might not necessarily be the staff person that has the most communication with them, but as mentioned also, it's a department-wide initiative, and so we do have other staff members more familiar with working with BMA.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. It was a great presentation, and I'm really excited for it, and I love that in your vision statement, you spoke about future generations, and, I'm sure we all want our children to be able to enjoy Boulder as much as we do. So that was a really great presentation. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Any other questions, Dave?
Yeah, I have a question for Jake. Jake, when you're doing your, trail evaluations, how long does it take to get around the entire trail system? Can you do that in 1 year, or is that a multiple year project, or what?
Yeah, Dave. So that's on a 5-year cycle. It's kind of like the undesignated trails. So I'm doing a fifth of the system a year. Our system's divided into 5 trail maintenance zones, so I focus on 1 a year. It's pretty slow going, but I'm able to do it.
And so when you, for any given year, then how do you integrate what you evaluate or determine on the ground into the next year's work program?
So each of those maintenance zones has a trail coordinator assigned to it. So I meet with them and go over some of my big picture findings, and we even get into some of the detailed data. And I can provide them with any information that way. I have a pretty close working relationship with all of them.
Great. And
Dave, if I can follow up a little bit with that too. So we talk a lot of, you might have heard the term Beehive, our asset management software system, our database system. So a lot of the information that we're collecting, whether it's regards to our conditions of our facilities or especially the condition of our trails, all that data is also fed into this, into our Beehive system. So that's sort of a one-stop shop where you can go and collect information, even though it might be year 2020 information and we're in 2024 or something. All that information is still very much retrievable from our Beehive asset management system.
Great. And one last thing. So we've talked about $100 million estimated, trail maintenance backlog. So Jake, back to you. In any given year, kind of what's your sense of how that backlog is being addressed? In other words, are we catching up, or are we maintaining, or are we still losing ground?
That's a tough question. I think that it varies depending on different areas, but we're starting to have data points to kind of show how we've improved. So I've only monitored 2 zones to compare from 2015 to 2019. I can compare one, and if there was improvement in that zone, so if I see similar improvement throughout the system, then we're making progress. So it looks like progress, but I am not all the way through the 5-year cycle to start to look at trends, but that will be coming.
Hey, thanks.
Thank you.
Other questions? Karen?
I have a few historical kind of background questions. First of all, I think I heard somebody say that the enjoy and protect came from the master plan process. I pulled out the 2005 visitor master plan to look up something today, and it was used back in 2005, and my guess is before that. So it very much predates the master plan. It's a more historical slogan or logo than that.
Hey, Karen, could I just jump in? Could
Sure.
I just jump in for a second? Actually, you're right. It was part of the visitor master plan process. It did not predate the visitor master plan. It came
Okay.
out of the visitor master plan process.
Yeah, and I think we did say visitor master plan, but if we didn't, it was an oversight. We did mean the visitor master plan,
rather than
not
the
the recent master plan.
Thank you. Great, thank you. And then another similar kind of question. Tell me a little bit about why you selected the organizations and the recreational uses that you showed on that slide. How that came about and why those particular.
The numbers, I don't have the numbers at the top of my head or fingers, so I would look to Mark and see if he may actually know the.
With kind of the short bit.ly links to our website, they get a few more hits and just a few than the QR codes. So they're not widely used, unfortunately. But as Hal said, that times are changing, that may change and evolve. We currently do have them on some of our signs, but like I said, they're just not very much used.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have just started, and I think it's been around for a while, but with Google Translate now, you don't have to type text. You can just open the app and hold it over a language, and it can translate it into that. So that would make it really easy for the older population that doesn't want to type in everything. So I kind of agree that somehow having those is definitely the way of the future. And as signs deteriorate or need maintenance, that it seems like a good idea. And I hear you that it's not catching on at the moment, but if there's any way to continue to have that be an option that we look at, I think that would be a good idea. And then I think that my other question was if anyone was able just to talk to me at the beginning. We talked a bit about the junior rangers and how to bring them in from diverse backgrounds. And I didn't know if there was anything more to add to that. I know this year with COVID, everything's been a bit different, but are we using Amistad to perhaps find our younger population to come into junior rangers?
I'd be happy to answer that if you like to. Yeah, no, it's a great question, Caroline. And I think that's as Lauren and I work with staff on the department equity team, we can bring an update on the various efforts like hiring practices. Even actually the contract we set up with Health Central Amistad was somewhat innovative in terms of working with a non-profit, so on the procurement side. And these are various things we can talk about. Yes, Natasha Steinman, who's a supervisor on the Junior Ranger program, has been looking at how to increase diversity, working with local community members. Obviously it was put on hold this year, but we'd like to pick that back up next year. And yeah, we'd love to bring back more information on that as we develop these various efforts.
Yeah, I was really happy to hear that. I think that is a good idea. And then my final question, kind of tags off of the QR codes. And again, this is signed, so this might not be the right place for this, or maybe Dan can answer it a little bit better. But I love my Boulder Trails app, and while we were speaking, I was playing with it to see if I was missing anything, and I believe that that is English only. So I don't know how difficult that might be to have a link to also switch to Spanish.
Interesting.
Yeah, I have never had that conversation with any staff people, so that is an interesting idea. I think it's something that we could reach out to our RIS staff and others and toss that idea around.
Yeah, it might be a good option if the QR codes aren't working, at least, you know, perhaps see if downloading that app and knowing that everything you do on there can be in various languages, maybe that could be the in-between from until everyone loves QR codes.
and metric as well as British measurements.
Yeah.
That was a recommendation, wasn't it?
It was, yes.
Yeah, that was an easy thing to add on the app.
So some of us board members that are long in the tooth don't know what QR codes are. So
They're the things that George Bush Sr. asked about at the checkout counter at the grocery store a decade ago.
Well, I hate to be considered in the same group as he, but in any event, it would be nice to know their relationship to what we're talking about. So that's one question. And then Juliet, I actually have a focus question. So I sent you email, or you and Mark, an email today on the questionnaire. Is it possible for us just to get a copy, for the board to get a copy of the questionnaire so we can see, you know, kind of the questions on it? And my question now to you is the participants in that. You said that there were 63 responses. So were those self-selected, or were visitors, you know, on the system surveyed, or how were those responses gotten?
And can you add on to that?
Huh?
Can you add on to that? I'm trying to come to grips with the difference between 9,000 members of the community that we're talking about as the target audience and 63 responses, as Dave referred to. And how many people does Amistad typically interact with? Is their audience 100 or a few hundred, or what is their audience? So talk about in numbers.
Before we go into the weeds on that, though, I still need to know QR codes.
Okay, so let me know. I'm going to try and answer each of those, but let me know if I forget one. So QR codes, simple answer is you can hold your phone up in the camera mode, and the QR code will then link directly to a website. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Sort of.
Kind of. I've never done that before, but yeah, I can do that.
So it's, yeah, an easier way to get to a web link that you don't have to type anything in or have a browser open.
Okay, great.
And then as far as the questionnaire, so we sent it out using El Centro Amistad's contacts. So they did an email blast, WhatsApp, Facebook, to all of their connections, which, Karen, I'm not sure what that total number is. I will have to touch base with them and get back to you on that. I know they're very widespread in the community, but I don't have that exact number. And so as far as the 63 responses, it's actually quite a good number. I mean, if you think about, you know, our broad community is what, 100,000, and we're happy when we get, you know, 200 responses to a questionnaire. It's a tricky thing to get responses to. And so in addition to El Centro Amistad sharing that link with their community contacts, we also, through the city, have community connectors. So local community members who are Spanish speakers who network within their community and help us engage with various projects. The link was distributed through the Conectores, community connectors. And then also through our open space contacts, and then the citywide Facebook page in Spanish.
So do we know if any of the actual respondents are open space visitors?
That was one of the questions on the questionnaire. And like I said, we haven't had time to analyze the results yet. But I think at a glance, I did see that about 35% responded that they had been to ponds, which was one of the questions.
And so just an observation on Sahio Ponds, that strikes me as intriguing because it's not where any public transportation opportunities exist, so people have to have a car or at least motorized transportation options in order to get there, which is somewhat surprising to me. What I'm wondering is why didn't we target San Juan del Centro or an area that actually has either a greenways or an open space trail close by to see kind of what the use is of those facilities by that community that's close by there, that they can actually walk to the area.
So we did look at, that was one of our criteria, was access by multimodal transportation, along with the other criteria listed on that side. And it is, believe it or not, it's just barely over a mile from a bus stop. So it is close to a bus route, as close or closer to a bus route than some of our other potential options. And with all of the amenities and the fact that we, again, based on the visitor survey, we know that Spanish speakers are already familiar with it. We know that word of mouth is another way that these community members really learn and explore new territories. So that was also one of the contributing factors. And because it's a little bit isolated, and it is going to be easier for us to kind of look at that before versus after, rather than an area where it might have 3 different access points, and then, well, we have one sign at an entrance point, but it's harder to actually gauge the difference.
Thanks.
Can you talk a little bit, Juliet, about the focus group participants? Only half of them were from Boulder. Is that also a problem of getting Spanish speakers in Boulder to even participate in a focus group?
I think it definitely, there are challenges around the virtual focus groups, and I think El Centro Amistad's reach goes beyond Boulder. There were many folks from the surrounding areas as well. Just like, many of our visitors from the broader community are Boulder County and beyond too. Does that answer your question, or?
Yeah, but I'm really, I keep going back to this question of our target audience within the city of Boulder. If we're really trying to reach Spanish-speaking residents of the city of Boulder, it seems to me we either need to be doing a lot more cultivation with that group, or somehow making our efforts more focused.
Karen, I think that just reflects the conundrum that the city of Boulder faces, that many of the much of the population is actually non-residential because they can't afford to live here, and so they're actually, it's more of a Boulder County phenomenon than the city of Boulder, right? I don't know, Juliet, you maybe have some thoughts on this, but I suspect that Spanish-speaking residents of Boulder are actually pretty limited, and many of the visitors to the open space are probably reside outside of the city of Boulder.
But as you've indicated, Dave, my interactions with the Spanish-speaking members of the city have been primarily in specific neighborhoods within the city.
Right.
And my experience has been that going to those neighborhoods as opposed to expecting those people to come somewhere else has been a good way to interact.
Yeah, I think so too. But I think it's still limited, and so I think to get a diversity of of opinion, the outreach probably has to be beyond actually residents of the city.
Any other thoughts for Juliet? Well, there's a lot here to think about, Juliet. Thank you very much. It's very thought-provoking, as you can tell, and we thank you for your presentation.
Oh, and Kurt, can I just ask one more? Juliet, we're coming back to the age-old cost question. Do you have any notion of kind of for the pilot what costs we're anticipating?
So it's about $10,000.
For the sign development, installation, kind of the whole deal.
For all of it, for installing, for the engagement, outreach, partnership, contract with El Centro Amistad, sign design and creation, fabrication and installation.
Okay.
And does that include an evaluation of the pilot or not?
So we'll be doing an after action review, and then that will kind of lead to next steps and where we go from here.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Juliet. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. Dan, back to you.
All.
Thanks, Juliet. Thanks, Mark. We'll bring Mark back in at the very end of the meeting. Kurt, just a heads up, we just want to acknowledge a retirement coming up in the staff, so I'll ask Mark to just make that announcement at the end of after board matters.
Okay.
So yeah, just the final item from staff is we have a very short report out. As probably most of you know, last Tuesday night, council approved the OSBT's preferred alternative recommendation 8-1. And it was approved as is, the motion. There was no amendments or variation from what was recommended to them from board and staff. So we have some clear direction now. And so what we'll be doing is transitioning from a planning phase and an engagement phase more into an implementation phase. And just so you know, I've asked John Potter to sort of sponsor the implementation phase. John was also the sponsor of the planning phase with Mark Gershman as the project manager. I've asked John if he would make sure that our implementation is well coordinated, efficient, that staff's talking to each other, that we have good communications, internal and external. And so John will be sort of putting together a framework for implementation just to make sure we're able to be effective and as possible, and that we're communicating well with each other and with the board, of course, and with the community. So that's what we're doing, is we're gearing up for implementation of the preferred alternative. We, of course, are already in implementation phase in the Prairie Dog Working Group recommendations, and that will continue. And so one of the next things you'll see out of Prairie Dog Management is we'll probably be announcing to you all the date for our annual meeting that will be coming up later this fall, which will invite community members and stakeholders, and of course the board, to our annual meeting on Prairie Dog Management, in which we'll report out on activities in regards to management and conservation of this past year, as well as taking a look ahead at what's proposed for the coming year. And so as soon as we land on a date, we will get that out to you all. So that's really all that we to plan to report out on that subject matter. So,
Dan, I just had a question. As you say, the council passed the motion without amendment. Less clear is the idea of council suggestions to staff. Do you get a readout on that at some point? I mean, do you guys have a clear understanding of that?
Like with this meeting, we're capturing notes, we're capturing intention. Well, what we heard from council more collectively is that is the intentions that the staff expressed for how we would go into a little bit more details of what's in the preferred alternative. That the board would expect that those intentions that we outlined would be something we would move forward with. And so we have made a note of some of those details. For instance, like we would continue to use a parcel by parcel analysis in making our decision making. Would continue soil baseline work, especially to make sure we do some soil baseline work prior to prairie dog removals, whether it's relocations or lethal. And so there are, and that we would continue to engage the community, that of course staff is more than willing to participate in any community-led forums or prairie dog type of meetings. So yes, Kurt, we made a list of some of those things that staff expressed as what our intentions are and documented those, and we intend to move forward with those.
Okay, thanks, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
Dan, the only thing I might add is depending on staff capacity and budget. So we have to be looking at the overall package and everything that we've been asked to do, which is many things now at this point. And, you know, in terms of taking on new work at this point, that's not going to be our highest priority. It's going to be focusing more on the direction from the board and council.
Thanks, John. Other questions here, folks?
Well, and I don't know, John, whether you've had a chance to watch the recording, but there were several council members who made it perfectly clear that staff should not get involved in additional work responsibilities that other council members were throwing out.
Other comments or questions for Dan or John? No? Okay.
I have a final question for Dan, but it's not about the integrated agricultural lands plan. Before we let Dan go from matters from the department.
Okay, any other questions on the prairie dog issue before we, and I just want to say my thanks to all the staff work that went into this. It was absolutely an enormous lift. And so thank you for keeping us going through a difficult issue and a difficult time when so much of it got put in abeyance for several months. So thank you. Yeah, Karen.
Dan, I don't know whether you have received any feedback from council last night about the OSMP budget, but
there was curious. No, yeah, it was about a 3-hour study session on the budget. I believe it ended around 9, and there was not a specific OSMP question.
Oh, good. Okay. Because there were in some of the hotline posts beforehand.
Right.
Good. Thanks.
Okay, Dan, anything else? Did you want to bring Mark in now, or when did you want to do that?
Yeah, why don't we do that, just so I don't forget, because it is a pretty monumental, and we owe a big thanks and gratitude to a particular staff member for their length of service. So I asked Mark if he wouldn't mind just announcing not only to the board but to the community.
Thank you, Dan. And it is, I mean, it's an honor to be able to represent Dave tonight. We know he's been with the department for over 2 decades.
And last name, Mark?
Dave Sutherland.
Everybody knows Dave.
Because I feel like everyone knows him in the community already in some ways. And yeah, he's been over 2 decades. A lot of people know much better than I do. And Lisa Dieroff provided me with some notes that I'll just mention tonight because it's obviously before my time. I think it's important to recognize simple things about Dave that he did that are like a legacy for the future internally for the department. We have a database of 6,000 digital images of open space that are high quality that over the years that can be searched. And I know Phil Yates is eternally grateful for that. He actually wrote and designed, we talked about it earlier, most of the printed brochures and interpretive signs that we see out on the system today, including working with Juanita on some of the Spanish-speaking ones. In fact, in regards to that, it was 1997 when he began the outreach program, knocking on doors, working with Spanish speakers. And it's testament to Dave and the other staff he worked with, how early they got into the equity work. One little thing I'm not sure if everyone's aware of, but the OSBT logo we see today when the department merged in 2001, it was Dave who drew and designed that. And we still love that logo today. In terms of programs Dave's done over the years, I think one that's been hugely successful is the demonstration garden at Chautauqua, the native plant garden. And that is always overbooked. It's incredible how popular it is. And I myself have been a recipient of seeds from Dave that are now in my garden, promoting native plants. And it's the type of work he does where another one is just the huge following he's got in regards programs like Jungle Birds, which he does in Bear Canyon, the Stargazing program, the Ice Age Relic program. If you haven't had a chance to go on that, please ask Dave. And I know he'd still like to volunteer in some capacity after he's retired as a volunteer naturalist. So we might see him, you might get the opportunity to again pick him up on that program. One thing I want to highlight briefly, which is during my tenure here at Open Space, is amazing, is his work with the Boulder Philharmonic to present concert nature hikes. And that tied in bird songs, sounds in nature with classical music and the connection Dave was able to make. In fact, it was so popular, he worked with the Boulder Philharmonic and was invited to DC to play to audiences via the Kennedy Center at Rock Creek National Park. And I believe that was in the New Yorker magazine or the New York Times. And it's just a brilliant example of Dave's thinking of how to engage audiences, how to make connections with nature, how it tied back to the arts. And Dave basically is a genius in that sense as an educator. Just a few things to mention about Dave beyond the city. He served for 4 years on the board of the Colorado Alliance for Environmental Education. And the E-Movement, which is a massive program today now for environmental literacy and environmental education with kids. Dave was one of the founding members of that. He's also won a few achievements. He won a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Environmental Education Colorado in 2010. He was the Champion of Environmental Education Award in 2015, and the City of Boulder Values Award for Innovation, as well as the COSA, which is the Colorado Open Space Alliance that's held every year. He won the Blue Gamma Award for Excellence. So you can see Dave's not only been recognized in terms of award, he's recognized in the community by, I think it's the 3,000 to 4,000 members that follow Dave's natural selection programs that come out every month. And just as a department, we just really want to wish him well. It's going to be incredibly sad to see him go, but really good luck on his new adventure.
Hear, hear. I would just mention his star parties too. I mean, that takes a lot of work. It's like herding cats, but wow, it's a tremendous experience. So can't say enough good things about the guy.
Yes. Thank you, Kurt.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and thanks to Dave.
All right, Kurt, we're turning it over to you.
That takes us to matters on the board. We have 2 items and then anything else anybody wants to add. I'll give just a quick update on the, you'll recall the motions that we passed regarding South Boulder Creek flood control. One of them was to strongly encourage additional study of the upstream option, and we laid out the whys and the wherefores, and we also laid out in our motions what we thought the steps in that analysis should be. And council supported that in addition to our other motions on South Boulder Creek, and began a process guided by the excuse me, the CU South Process Committee, Sam Weaver and Rachel Friend. and sort of added to that group's meeting some additional staff to look at South Boulder Creek. Karen and I serve on that, along with 2 members from RAB and 2 members from the Planning Board. We've had 2 meetings, August 5th and August 20th, and then on the 25th, we had a follow-up call with the utilities staff to ask more technical questions about some of their analyses. I would say we've made very good progress, but if you look at our motion, we're still, I would say, working through the first part of that, which is to assess the extent to which the flood flows could be moved into the South, CU South property and the gravel mine area. But I think we are getting a much more in-depth understanding of those staff analyses. And because we've been able to iterate a little bit, staff is going back now and looking at some more of our technical questions. And I think the process is going efficiently, and I think it's going in a good direction right now. I would let Karen chime in on her perceptions too.
I totally agree with everything you said, Kurt. And my only concern is the timeline and how we figure out how fast we're going and how we get things done, because we have a clear cutoff date of December 2020. And Kurt and I, nor the other board members, none of us have any control over when we have meetings or what's going to get done or when it's going to get done. So that's all. My perception is that that's in the hands of Joe Tediucci, who's the head of the utilities department. And so I'm a little bit concerned about the timeline and how to move it forward within the limited time that we have to actually get the job done.
Yeah, I think everyone has that concern, Karen. Our next scheduled meeting is September 18th. I will say I thought our follow-up discussion with the utility staff was enormously helpful and vastly more efficient, and maybe that can happen. I think it will help move this along in the timeline that you described, which will be challenging. Any questions about that, folks?
And thanks to Dan and Joe for organizing that August 20th meeting. I agree. I thought that was very productive.
Yeah, I think the idea is to understand what are the questions that you would like us, well, like utility staff to look at. And I would just say from a staff perspective, I actually think we're probably, from when we started in early August, we're actually probably ahead of where we thought we would be. So Karen, I hear your concern, but in terms of teasing out exactly what utility staff ought to be looking at, what are the information that you're interested in, I actually think we're probably understanding that in greater detail a little faster than I thought we would. So, and I would also just venture to say that if for some reason we have incomplete, that staff, that they need more time to work on that, I think we would cross that bridge at that time and work with the process committee about that conundrum, if there is indeed a conundrum at that point. So.
Yeah, I would agree, Dan. Thank you. And again, thanks for helping facilitate the discussion on the 20th. I think that's it then. We would go next to the Greenways Advisory Committee, and Dave represents us on that. And I know you'd like to update us on some of the thinking there, Dave.
Thanks, Kurt. Yes, the Greenways Advisory Committee met last month and did 2 things. One is the purpose of the annual meeting was to approve the Greenways CIP for 2021 to 2026. And that went as part of the budget discussion to council last night. The other thing, and Leah, I don't know if you can bring the screen up with the motion language, but the advisory committee wanted also to make a motion to council regarding its concern about some of the management issues related to the Greenways program. And so these were the two motions that went to council. So there was unanimous support for the 2021-2026 CIP. And just as a quick reminder to the board, the annual budget for the Greenways program is about $346,000, of which about a little less than 100,000 is contributed by the flood department, and a little under 100,000 is contributed by the transportation department, and about 150,000 or so lottery funds. So that makes up the annual Greenways budget. And of that, about $105,000 goes annually to operation and maintenance, and about 46,000 goes to habitat restoration or management. So in addition, I just wanted the board to know the next motion, the advisory committee was concerned that council be informed of the concerns the committee had. And so the second motion basically said three things. One is that the committee thought that there ought to be a serious consideration of reinstating the Greenways coordinator position in the utilities department, which was eliminated, the position was eliminated in 2018 as a budget reduction. The three funding sources, which I mentioned, the transportation fund, stormwater and flood management fund, and the lottery fund, they thought that those funds should be evaluated and future budgetary needs identified. And this is through, I guess I got ahead of myself, this is through the Greenways Master Plan update, which is scheduled for 2022. So the bulk of the budget, the Greenways budget, program budget for that year, 2022, will actually go to the Master Plan update. So these three items were considered by the advisory committee to be part of its recommendation for the Greenways Master Plan update. And then finally, and importantly, it was the evaluate future needs of management greenways, which, as you can see from the brief narrative, the issues are not dissimilar to the ones that the Open Space Department and the Open Space Board have been wrestling with, as far as increasing levels of use, impacts from that use, and managing and restoring the natural values associated with greenways. So those were the motions that went. I just wanted to make sure that the board knew that. The issue on number 2 is that looking at other funding sources for the program, there was discussion about the cooperation between the various city departments, which included Open Space and Mountain Parks and the Parks and Recreation Department, with the Greenways program. And so I expect that as part of the master plan update for Greenways, there will be involvement by the Open Space and Mountain Parks Department staff as part of that update. So that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Dave. Questions or thoughts for Dave?
Thank you.
Thank you for the update.
Hey, Hal.
I just thought, thank you, Dave. I really appreciate that. Dan, I thought of one thing. I kind of missed the moment. It occurs to me that upstream or downstream, whatever happens at CU South will have open space impacts. I was wondering, is anybody in the department looking at the RJH report of regulatory multipliers and basically updating and confirming, so when we arrive at that point, we actually know where regulations lie? That seems like something that it doesn't really matter what we learn in upstream or downstream, that we should really be starting to think about what that inventory of regulatory multipliers looks like.
And you could broaden that to be an inventory of all the regulatory requirements, I would think.
Sounds like Adam
Yeah,
already said tonight that's his bailiwick.
Yeah, we have pretty good expertise on understanding the regulatory requirements of certainly of projects that we typically do, Hal, and we're very involved in this project, as you know, at the staff level, and we'll be evaluating the regulatory side of that as it pertains to open space and management of open space.
Yeah, I was asked by a couple council members about that particular topic and recognized it felt like we were in reliance on RJH. And I just hope we can get to a place where we're in reliance on the department.
That's right.
And I take as a good sign the fact that staff said they're developing the purpose and need statement for the Corps right now. That's sort of a first step into the regulatory consultation. So that's good. Other thoughts, questions? Okay, well, other matters from the board that anyone wants to add at this point or speak to?
Yeah, I'm not a board member, but if you wouldn't mind, I would just remind everybody that, of course, we will see you all on October 14th, but prior to that, we will have one of our 2 fall retreat sessions coming up on the 23rd of September. And so probably by the end of next week, we will, Leo, work with staff in getting you out materials, any pertinent materials that may apply to promote conversation for our retreat. And just also another reminder that Hal, Kurt, Steve, Leon, and I will get together this Friday to continue to do a little bit of retreat prep and planning. So it's on our minds. We're working at the staff level to hopefully provide some input that would be valuable to help kickstart some conversation and work with Hal and Kurt to see if we're on the right track.
And Dan, how will catering be handled for the retreat?
That means at the adjournment of the meeting, you guys will all leave and go home and prepare yourself a meal to your liking.
That's exactly my question, Kurt.
But we have about 30 seconds between the end of that meeting and the start of the South Boulder Creek meeting.
Well, there you go. So make it quick: carrot sticks and hummus dip.
Thank you, Dan. Anything else? If not, until the retreat and then our October meeting, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Before 9 o'clock. Woo!
Thank you, Kurt.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.